She waited 3 years for 1 point. Most people forget the score of a match within a week. Alex Eala never forgot hers. Not because it broke her, because it built her. Some defeats bury a career before it starts. Others plant a fuse that burns quietly for years, waiting for the right moment to go off. For Alex Eala, that fuse finally reached its end on a hard court in Washington, D.C., in front of a crowd that had turned an American stadium into a small piece of the Philippines. She wasn't just playing a first-round match. She was closing a door that had been left open since 2023. Across the net stood the same rival who had once stopped her cold. An Olympic champion. A name that used to intimidate her. A rematch nobody scheduled. One that fate simply handed back to her. This wasn't about revenge. It was about proof. Proof that every early morning, every lonely drill, every setback had actually meant something. Because sometimes a scoreboard lies about who really won that day. To understand Washington, you have to go back to Hongjo. September 2023. The Asian Games. Alex Eala was 18, unseated in reputation, unseated in expectation. Almost nobody outside the Philippines knew her name yet. Standing across the net was Qinwen, the tournament's biggest star, a player already being talked about as the future of Chinese tennis. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. A rising teenager against a player who was about to become an Olympic gold medalist within a year. Nobody in that stadium walked in expecting a contest. They expected a coronation. Zheng was supposed to cruise through, add another routine win to a resume that was already building toward gold, and move on without much resistance. The first set went exactly how everyone predicted. Zheng dictated. Eala scrambled. It looked over before it began. But something shifted. Instead of folding, Eala got tougher. Rally by rally, she started matching Zheng's intensity instead of just absorbing it. The gap between promising junior and genuine threat started closing in real time. Every extended rally chipped away a little more at the assumption that this was a mismatch. Every deep, well-placed return made a point that was supposed to be routine take twice as long as it should have. The crowd that arrived expecting a formality started leaning forward instead, sensing something they hadn't planned for. By the second set, this wasn't a formality anymore. It was a fight. Eala pushed the match into a decider, stretching it past 3 hours before finally falling short. She lost that day, but she didn't leave empty-handed. She left with belief, the kind that doesn't show up on a stat sheet but changes how an athlete walks onto every court afterward. Because here's the thing about that kind of loss, it doesn't feel like defeat while it's happening. It feels like evidence. Evidence that the gap between talented junior and genuine tour-level threat wasn't as wide as everyone assumed. Eala didn't need to win that day to prove that to herself. She just needed to compete like she belonged, and for 3 hours, she did exactly that. She flew home from Hongjo with a loss on the scoreboard and a completely different sense of herself underneath it. What losing built? That semi-final in Hongjo didn't end anything. It started something. Over the next 3 seasons, Eala's career didn't just improve, it transformed. She climbed from a name tennis fans were still learning to pronounce into a player who beats Grand Slam champions and doesn't blink doing it. Along the way, she took down Iga Swiatek in straight sets. She beat Elena Rybakina on grass. She reached the second week of Wimbledon, becoming the first Filipino to make the 4th round of a Grand Slam singles draw, a milestone that turned her into a genuine national story back home, not just a name tennis fans quietly followed. None of that happened overnight. It happened one tournament at a time, one small ranking jump at a time, the kind of progress that's boring to describe and brutal to actually live through. Early mornings. Long flights. Losses that never made headlines but taught her something anyway. By the time the summer of 2026 rolled around, she had climbed into the world's top 30, a spot almost nobody would have predicted for her back in 2023, when she was still just the young Filipino who almost pulled off an upset in Hongjo. Every one of those results carried the same quiet message underneath it. This wasn't luck. A single upset can be an accident. A pattern of them, spread across different surfaces, different continents, different styles of opponent, is something else entirely. It's a player announcing, one match at a time, that she isn't an underdog story anymore. She's simply good. Meanwhile, the player who beat her in Hongjo was fighting a completely different battle. Zheng Qinwen won Olympic gold in 2024, reaching as high as world number 4. But 2026 turned into a grind for her. Early exits, inconsistent form, a ranking that slid all the way down to 123rd. She arrived in Washington on a wild card, trying to rebuild a season that had gotten away from her. 2 careers, moving in opposite directions. And then the draw brought them back together. Same rivalry, completely different stakes. Almost 3 years to the week since Hongjo, Eala and Zheng were drawn against each other again, this time in the first round of the Mubadala DC Open, a WTA 500 event at the William H. G. Fitzgerald Tennis Center. The moment the draw came out, Filipino fans didn't need reminding what this match meant. Here's where it gets interesting, because this rematch didn't go the way the story should have gone. Long before the first serve, the stadium already felt different. Philippine flags stretched across entire sections. Families had made the trip specifically for this match. For a few hours, Washington sounded less like a WTA 500 event and more like a home game in Manila. Every time Eala's name was announced, the noise rose again, a wave of it rolling down from the upper rows before settling back into anticipation. It wasn't just support. It was recognition. The sense that a lot of people in that crowd had been waiting for this specific pairing to show up on a schedule somewhere, and now here it finally was. Zheng came out swinging. Her serve found rhythm early, her forehand carried real weight, and she took the first set 6-4. For a moment, it looked like history might repeat itself, the powerful ball striker imposing herself on the crowd favorite. Then the match tilted. At 4-3 in the second set, Zheng broke Eala's serve at love. She was 2 games away from finally winning a match in Washington, a city where she'd never once come out on top. Everything was lining up for her. That's exactly when Eala refused to let the story write itself the easy way. 2 games. That's all that stood between Zheng and finally beating the demons of this specific city. 2 games between Eala and a rematch that would have ended the same painful way Hongjo did. Pressure doesn't build character. It reveals it. Instead of unraveling, Eala tightened up in all the right ways. She slowed her rhythm down, leaned into longer rallies, and started taking Zheng's pace away from her rather than matching it shot for shot. Game by game, the momentum that had belonged entirely to Zheng started slipping. Eala clawed the second set back, forcing it to 6-4 in her favor and sending the match to a decider. Just like that, the momentum that Zheng had built over the entire opening set and half of the second evaporated in a handful of games. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. No meltdown, no obvious collapse. Just a slow, steady transfer of control from one player to the other, the kind that's only obvious in hindsight once the set is already gone. And once the third set began, this stopped being a contest. Eala exploded out of the gate, racing to a 4-0 lead before Zheng could even settle into the final set. Zheng managed one break just to get on the scoreboard, but Eala answered almost immediately with a break of her own, and calmly served out the match, closing it out 4-6, 6-4, 6-1. 2 hours and 26 minutes after it started, the scoreline finally matched the moment. The stadium didn't just cheer. It exhaled. When the final point landed, the release inside that stadium wasn't just about one win. It was about 3 years compressing into a single afternoon. Fans who had followed Eala since her junior days, through losses nobody outside tennis circles noticed, through the long, unglamorous climb up the rankings, finally got to watch the story catch up to the ending they'd been hoping for. Eala didn't celebrate wildly. There was no fist-pumping outburst, no dramatic scream to the sky. Just a quiet, satisfied smile, the look of someone who understood exactly what this result meant, without needing to perform it for the cameras. That restraint said something too. Players who are still chasing validation tend to celebrate loudly, like they need the crowd to confirm the moment actually happened. Players who expected to win don't need that. Eala's reaction looked less like relief and more like closure, like she'd simply finished something that had been sitting unfinished in the back of her mind for 3 years. For the fans in the stands, many of whom had followed every step of her rise, the junior titles, the near misses, the slow accumulation of big scalps, this wasn't just another first-round win to scroll past on a results page. It was the specific chapter they'd been waiting to see written. Why this win matters beyond one scoreboard. This wasn't only an emotional story. It was a strategically important one too. Eala had arrived in Washington coming off a stellar grasscourt stretch but without a hardcourt match under her belt since spring. A win over a former world number 4, even one out of form, is exactly the kind of result that builds confidence heading into the rest of the North American hardcourt swing, a stretch of tournaments that carries heavy ranking points on the road toward the US Open. Confidence compounds in tennis. Players who believe they can win against anyone tend to keep proving it, and opponents start feeling that belief before a single point is even played. And right now, Eala has both halves of that equation, rising results on the scoreboard, and a signature, symbolic win to back them up psychologically. It also matters who she beat, not just that she won. Zheng might be ranked 123rd at the moment, but that ranking doesn't erase what she's capable of on a good day. An Olympic gold medal and a run to world number 4 don't happen by accident. Beating a player like that, even in a down season, still counts for something in a locker room. Her reward for beating Zheng? A second-round matchup against Leylah Fernandez, the tournament's defending champion and 7th seed, another difficult, high-profile test in a season already full of them. There's no easing into anything at this stage of Eala's career. Every round now brings someone dangerous. Every draw comes loaded with a name capable of ending a good week early. That's simply the tax that comes with climbing into the top 30. The schedule stops being forgiving, and it doesn't ask whether you're ready. The lesson underneath the scoreline. Go back to that 18-year-old in Hongjo for a second. She lost. She didn't quit. 3 years later, that same loss had quietly turned into the foundation for one of the most meaningful wins of her career. Not because fate arranged it that way, but because she used the years in between to become someone capable of finishing what that earlier version of herself had started. That's really the whole story here. Progress isn't always visible in the moment it's happening. Sometimes the losses that sting the most are just unfinished business, waiting for the version of you that's finally ready to close them out. Alex Eala walked off that court in Washington having done exactly that. She'll walk on to the next one against Leylah Fernandez with a completely different problem to solve. No old scores to settle, just a defending champion standing between her and another round. Different opponent, different story. But the same version of Eala will be showing up, the one who plays every point like it's the only one that matters, and figures out the rest later. That's the part that should worry the rest of the draw. This wasn't a one-off emotional peak that Eala will come down from. It's simply who she's become. A player who used to hope she belonged on these courts now walks onto them expecting to win, and 3 years after Hongjo, the results have finally caught up to that belief. And if her current form is any indication, Washington wasn't the finale. It's just the latest chapter in a career that keeps insisting on writing itself upward, one closed door at a time. 3 years ago, an 18-year-old walked off a court in Hongjo with nothing but a loss and a feeling she couldn't quite explain. In Washington, that feeling finally had a scoreline to match it.